which is technically correct, but for reasons that we won't explore. All right, so at this point, Sargon calls Kraut, and he asks for, at the beginning of the conversation, he asks if he can record the conversation.
Yes.
So what is your call on what's Sargon's intent here, based on the fact that he wants to record the conversation, and he asks to Kraut, who is a friend of his, to record the conversation? Why did he ask this?
Well, one of the faults I have is that I a lot of times jump the gun and just jump to the conclusion, because I'm a fairly logical person and a systematic person, and sort of, I'm not completely stupid. I'm sort of stupid, but not totally stupid. And so a lot of times my flaw is that I jump right to the conclusion as opposed to going step by step. So let me go step by step so that you yourself can come up with the conclusion. Suppose, JF, you and I are speaking, and we're speaking about football. Or we're talking about what we're going to do this weekend or something like that. Why would I record you? Why would I say, oh, JF, do you mind if I record this conversation of us talking about Arsenal playing Milban or whatever? No, you'd be like, why are you going to do that? It would be ridiculous. Why would I record a conversation with you? The only reason I can think of is because I would be worried that you or I are going to say something that would be good to have a record of for later use. That would be my thinking. I don't know about you. Because, you see, the only time I can think of that would be innocent insofar as recording a conversation would be like, for instance, suppose you're talking, you are going to describe to me, JF, some issue of biology, some genetics or some stuff like that I'm not very familiar with. So I say, JF, do you mind if I record you, because you're going to be talking about genetics and cells and mitochondria and stuff that I have no idea. So I'm just going to record it so that later I can listen to it. The way I would record, for instance, a professor lecturing me, right? That would be perfectly innocent, and I'm sure you wouldn't have a problem with it. But if we're talking about things that we're doing, and I record the conversation, then it seems to me that the reason I'm recording it is because I want to have a record of that so I can show to other people at some later date, so that I can prove or lead people to conclude that I knew something or did not know something at certain points in time. I mean, do you see it any other way? I'm asking you.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that if you record something like this and you ask for permission, it's because you have an intended use for the recording. Now, intended use from Sargon's side could be two things. Did he plan to... was he planning to make a video about this, or was he just trying to back himself, to protect his back, and to be able to be denying, if the story ever came out that Kraut was engaged in doxing, was he just wanting to have a record of him telling Kraut that this was morally wrong? Those are the two hypotheses I have.
Well, I don't know about that, but what I do know is that in the UK, you have to have the permission of both parties to record a conversation, okay? So there was a reason that Sargon had to ask it. It's illegal, and actually, as I understand it, I could be wrong, but you could get into some kind of trouble in the UK if you record both sides of a conversation without the other party knowing about it. Okay, on the one hand, which is not the case in the United States. In the United States, depending on the state that you're in, you can record a conversation without the other party knowing, and it's not a crime. Okay. Just want to point that out because there are actually two recordings of that conversation. There's the recording that Sargon made, where he asked to record and then began to record, presumably. And then there's the conversation that Zeph recorded, where he recorded on Kraut's side of the equation, and it's the recording that we have. Now, insofar as that conversation, yeah, like every great piece of artwork, you listen to some great piece of music, like, I don't know, the Mighty Ninth by Beethoven, right, or Signals by Rush, or some other great album, and you find details that you've been listening to for years, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I'd never noticed that before. Some little curlicue, some little something in it. Right. The same thing happens to me with that recording. It's a remarkable piece of audio, and I suggest that everybody who's interested in this topic listen to it, because it does seem to sound as if Kraut is subservient to Sargon, and is in fact very afraid of Sargon. That is not the relationship you have with a fellow YouTuber. For instance, I happen to have a wonderful relationship with Medicare, with Black Pigeon Speaks, with a bunch of big YouTubers. They're all delightful people. Hunter Avalon that you met on the stream that we did together, right? They have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I have barely 13,000 subscribers. I'm a tiny channel, and yet I would never speak to them in this frightened way that you heard Kraut speaking to Sargon. And I know for a fact that these fine individuals that I mentioned would never, presume the relationship that Sargon was clearly presuming when he was speaking to Kraut.
Yeah, so the details of this conversation. So Sargon starts by trying to have Kraut admit that he is committing acts of doxing. And you can see that Kraut is trying not to admit it on the record. And that's something I catch after listening to it 6 times, okay? Kraut is like, no, I'm not doing this. And Sargon is like, come on. Come on, man. Come on, man. Yeah, I know. And so there is the implicit admission that these two people, they both know that acts of doxing have been performed, but Kraut doesn't want to admit it on the record, and Sargon is trying to have him admit on the record.
Yes.
All right. So,
and also what's interesting is that at the end of that conversation, when they hung up, the first reaction of Kraut is, oh my God, Sargon is going to throw me under the bus.
Yeah. Know? So from Kraut's perspective, he understood something there. He understood my friend or my we could call it my YouTube leader, my chief commander is burning me. He's gonna throw the blame on me. He tried to get me on the record to admit something that we both know is true.
Yes. One thing though, as you said, he's going to try to get me to get the blame, is what you said. The Kraut's.
Yeah.
So that would mean that from Kraut's point of view, there is more blame to be shared with Sargon. Wouldn't that be the implication?
It's a speculation. And then again, it's a valid speculation. Normally, when you use words like burn, you mean that you are part of a conspiracy, and that part of that conspiracy is trying to scapegoat you and get you as the only person guilty of it.
Yes, right, exactly.
So, oh my God. Look, Coach, as we speak, I've just had a donation of $500 US.
Wow.
On Super Chat.
Buy me a drink at least, JF.
so when I go to the UK, I will buy you a big drink. Quebec says
big drink. Thanks. Just a big drink.
It will be a double scotch. Quebec on the Super Chat says it irritates me that this character assassination with doxed info actually worked. It helped deflect criticism from genuine bad behavior with irrelevant nonsense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right. But let's continue with this, because I very much am liking where you're going, JF, with all this. I very much respect how systematic you're going to be, and I know for a fact that if anything, I know that you're just doing aces in my book. So please continue.
Yeah, so it took a lot of work. When I state these statements, when I say we know for a fact that Jeff Holiday admitted X, Y, Z, this takes a lot of work to confirm. So I want people to know that just go through this it's probably going to be a 2 or 3 hour live stream at this point. This is true information, and this is how you do investigative work in a pile of crap, by the way, because 99% of what I read end up to be false. And what I'm reporting here is what I can certainly tell you is true. So in this conversation, we have Kraut, which to me, the first times I listened to the audio, I was like, Kraut must be suffering from some sort of psychosis. But no, his paranoia was correct. Sargon was trying to frame him to admit something on the record that he did not want to admit, which is that he was involved in your doxing.
Yes.
Now, continuing this part of the conversation, we reach a second goal of Sargon in that conversation, where Sargon just states, well, I believe that what you do here is morally wrong rather than morally good.
Right. Because it is. Because of the reasons that I discussed at the very beginning of this conversation with you.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, it's morally wrong because whatever you can do with this information, there's no good use to it. You cannot possibly be interested in this information if you are at the level of IDs and of political discussion on YouTube. It has to be for personal smearing. So that's my take from the Sargon audio. Of course, there's lots of details. I encourage everyone to listen to this audio. It's really a piece of anthropology, as you seem to suggest. It's really a piece of internet history. But do you take away other things from this audio?
Oh, a lot. A lot from it. First of all, the tone of the relationship between the two men is very illuminating. It is clearly, they sound like a crowd and his group. They sound like underlings. And they sound like underlings who have screwed up and are afraid of the boss's reaction. Now that's a first thing. As I said before, the relationship between any two YouTubers, between a very large YouTuber and a smaller YouTuber, is not going to sound like that. You, JF, have spoken to huge YouTubers, and you're your own man, and they are their own men too, and you speak to each other as equals. Only the difference is that one happens to have a bigger audience than the other, but that doesn't mean that one is subservient to the other. On the contrary, you meet each other as equals. And the fact that there was a clear inequality in the relationship between Sargon and Kraut is very indicative. There's something else that I have always thought about that is key about the recording, is at the very end of it. There's this little snippet at the very, very end of it where Kraut says that, in his own words, he says that he and Jeff Holiday and some black guy and Dave Cullen were all going to make videos attacking the alt-right, but that Jeff Holiday, some black guy, and Dave Cullen, for financial reasons, decided to back off. And Kraut said that he is the only one doing this task, and that he's carrying the weight of this task, and that it's not fair. This is very interesting because I want to know who set up those 4 YouTubers to do this attack on the alt-right. Who was it who said, okay, you, and you 4 are going to do these videos attacking the alt-right? Who gave that instruction? How did the 4 of these individuals come to this agreement? Did they come to this agreement all on their own, independently? Or, and I'm leaving this out there, or did somebody tell them to do this? Somebody order them to do this? Somebody who had helped these 4 channels grow their audience? Because do keep in mind, each of these channels, Jeff Holiday's, Kraut and Tease, some black guy, and Dave Cullen, they all owed a very large percentage of their subscriber base to Sargon, who at different times had aided these channels in phenomenal growth spurts. You only have to look at the Social Blade numbers for each of those channels, which I have, and you can see how their numbers jumped because of Sargon's aid.
Yeah, so you're clearly suggesting that there was a kind of central coordination accomplished by Sargon. I personally don't doubt that in some form. I wouldn't say it's necessarily an instruction that Sargon intended as such, because Sargon, I know him personally. I know that he considers himself free, and he considers the people who he talked to free. But that's Sargon's...
says that he considers them free.
Well, I do believe that this is the true Sargon position, but I also think that there are subordinate relations emerging from these beta males, essentially acting as subordinates to Sargon. I think that's how it works. I think that what you said about the audio is absolutely true. We have insight on how the Sargonites are operating. They literally owe a part of their YouTube career to Sargon, and as such, they are really fearful of anything that Sargon has to say. So yeah, I think that's a valid hypothesis there. So moving on with this part of the story. So there's this call where Sargon attempted 2 things. 1, to frame Kraut to admit doxing on record. 2, to display that he was morally objected to it. And now in the 2 weeks that follow the original acts of doxing, which are traceable back to somewhere around November 13, November 14. We have a Kiwi Farm post that emerges, and we now know the route that the information has taken. So the information on the Kiwi Farm post about you emerged from the triangle between Sargon, Kraut, and Jeff Holiday. Again, I'm not blaming all individual for all actions, but we've talked about the details. We've talked about what we know and what we don't know. But from that triangle was passed by Kraut to King of Pole, and King of Pole passed the information. Was passed by Kraut to the Guardian, and the Guardian passed the information to King of Pole, and King of Pole put up the Kiwi Farms post 2 weeks after the original information about you was found. Now, I've had hours of autistic discussion with King of Pole and the Guardian. I'm sparing you the details because they would argue that they will say, well, we could have found that information elsewhere and we had other ways to the information. Yeah, okay, you may have other ways to the information, but they did not succeed at denying, and I pressed them on the question, and they danced around the question, but they cannot deny that information has emerged from Kraut, went to the Guardian passed it to King of Pole, King of Pole posted it on Kiwi Farms. That chain is absolutely true.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And also what's kind of pathetic is that these two individuals insist that they found the information when they didn't. It was Kraut, okay? But they want to take credit for it, as if it gives them a little feather in their cap or something, which I find kind of pathetic. At the end of the day, you're trying to ruin somebody. That's what they were trying to do.
So now we're going to get into the details of the Kiwi Farm post. And then we're going to come back to Sargon's use of that Kiwi Farm post. Because this whole story twists in an incredible manner. You wouldn't even write fiction that's as ridiculous as this. Because we have Sargon and saying on the record and recording himself saying, what you do, Kraut, is morally wrong. And later, we're going to come back to this in maybe 30 minutes, but Sargon will reuse that information that precisely emerged from Kraut. So before we get to that amazing twist, let's review the Kiwi Farm post. So the Kiwi Farm post was titled very aggressively, saying Coach Red Pill and revealing your name and other handles that you've gone by in the past on the internet. And it titled you as scam artist, male feminist pretending to be alt-right, possible rapist, interrogation mark. Oh my God. What a big respect you do when you add the interrogation mark to your false allegation. Liar and failed economist. And thanks to a guy on 4chan, this has spared me a lot of...
Can we get into the actual title? Because it was Coach Red Pill, and then it had a couple of handles that I'd used in the past. And then what was the first thing because I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, so I will repeat it. Scam artist, male feminist pretending to be alt-right.
Not true. Yeah, never true. I've never scammed anybody. I've never been arrested for any crime ever. And I've never scammed anybody. And in point of fact, the individual with whom I had a business disagreement, he himself said that it had nothing to do with any kind of scam. It was just that I was an asshole and a business dispute. Now, insofar as me being a secret feminist who's pretending to be
I'm stopping you because we're just at the reading of the title. We're gonna get through all the allegations. You're way too excited. All right. Okay. So the first allegation: scam artist.
JF, I just want to point out when somebody sneers you about things that are that are not true. Yeah. It raises your blood pressure.
Absolutely.
Okay? If I say to you, JF, that you're a poopy head who's actually left-handed, even though he claims to be right-handed, you're going to look at me and say, "What the hell are you talking about?" You're going to ignore me. But if I say something that would touch your reputation, that would smear your reputation, your hackles are going to get up. I mean, if I were to say something like for instance, that you're a cannibal or something like that, okay, I'm just trying to, you'd be incredibly upset because it's a smear that you don't want anybody to believe, because it's an awful smear. To be labeled a cannibal, nobody wants that, right?
Yeah.
The same here. Okay, and so that's why my hackles get up, and I'm going to try as best I can to be as calm and rational as I can. But I hope you and your audience will understand how enraging these smears are, how enraging it makes me feel to be smeared with shit that is false, but that some people now believe is true, and they will never change their minds about it.
I fully understand. I've been the victim of false allegations myself, and lately the internet has been interested in past stories where clearly some of my exes have been making claims in court knowing that they would not pass, knowing that it wouldn't lead to criminal accusation because they were so baseless, but they did these allegations precisely because they knew I was a YouTuber, and they knew eventually someone would find these documents and just base their judgment on the allegation. So it's somehow what happened with you too. So let's review this. The first thing they called you was scam artist. And they based this on a story that happens with Steve Keen. Now let's look at some of the details of the claims in the post. The first is that they quote a tweet that claims that your scamming of Steve Keen would have been covered in an economic magazine. And the person who did the research on this case found out that this tweet came from a parody Twitter account, which essentially recognized in its description, the description of the Twitter account says, "At Macro Business, we use hype, dogma, and misinformation to deliver a narrow, pessimistic, perma-bearish view of Australia economies and housing market, parenthesis, parody." So this was a troll account on Twitter, and they quote it as an economic magazine. Were you aware that this tweet had been...
No idea. I was not interested.
Yeah, so it seems that now that the research has been done, this is essentially the equivalent of The Onion for economic magazine. So if this is your basis to say that this story went public and that it's confirmed, it's really a shaky ground to start with. Now let's go through this story with Steve Keen. So you were a business partner with Steve Keen. Can you tell us what is it that you guys worked on? I understand that there were separate and many projects.
No, it was basically one project with one addendum. And the project was basically to take a website that he had and turn it into a subscription service. Now, I would finance the creation of the website, the back office, the whole infrastructure for it. And he would provide the content. And now, he never paid me money. I put up all the money for it. And then in total, it was something like $25,000. A little bit over that. And the idea was basically that it would be a subscription service whereby he would deliver economic content to a subscriber base, and that was the business. Now, from my point of view, it was a trial balloon to see if this subscription model might work, and it was just a lot of hassle. It was a lot of hassle. It took 2 months to set up the thing because of different reasons, and part of it was because Steve Keen wanted certain things a certain way, and that's perfectly fine. I also, within the expenses that I accrued, I financed the revamping of his regular blog site, okay, just so that it would look the same and be of a piece insofar as the presentation is concerned. It was not strictly part of our deal, but I figured, I'll do it just to keep him happy, right? And so anyway, I did this, I financed this, and after about 4 or 5 months, my business partner wanted to withdraw from the partnership, and he wanted to shut the site down. Now, what had happened was that he was an economics professor who had lost his job. Now, the circumstances of him losing his job were murky, but I didn't really pay attention to him. He lost his job, and so he, doing this partnership with me would have meant a revenue stream for him at a time when, presumably, if you're unemployed, you need a revenue stream. And so, he did it, but then I think it was 4 or 5 months, I forget how long, he decided to pull out. Now, from my point of view, that was a catastrophe because I had barely recovered the money I'd put into it, and I really hadn't turned much of a profit at that point. And the whole point of doing a business is to turn a profit. That's the rationale for it. And do keep in mind that in our agreement, we split the gross revenue 50-50. So as soon as the site started operating, my former business partner was perceiving an income, whereas I was perceiving an income that went to pay for the cost for the $25,000 odd that I'd spent on the site. So, just after 3 or 4 months, I was barely starting to turn a profit, whereas he had been turning a profit from the very first day, because that was the nature of our agreement. And he wanted to pull out, and I didn't want him to pull out, because what had happened was that he had gotten another university position. And so he basically wanted out. And I didn't want that, and so, of course, we had an impasse. And this is a perfectly normal thing between adults who are involved in a business. I never scammed him. I never took any money of his under any set of circumstances. He had access to the credit card processing by which all the payments were processed, of course. He had access to all the information to see it. And it was on the level, on the up and up. Okay, there was never an issue. And the fact is, this individual never sued me, either me personally or the company that was carrying out this business. And there was no legal dispute whatsoever. There was a business dispute, a fighting over the situation, but nobody cheated anybody out of any money. On the contrary, I put up the money for this thing. I was the one who was, in a sense, suckered in this thing. Okay.
So
and that's why I was
without
pissed off.
listing all the details of the contract that linked you to Steve Keen at that time, is it a correct representation to say that he was committing to be a sort of content creator for this site, that you were
Yes.
offering a sort of technical assistance service in putting that whole platform up? And there is allegation in the Kiwi Farms post that there was there was something in that contract that specified that at any point he could get back the website for $1. It
Yes.
doesn't sound like good business decision on your part if you signed a contract that allowed him to take back the site for $1 under no
it
other
was his
condition.
site.
Is it the case that the contract specified that he could get out of the deal in any way he wanted for $1?
No, you could get back his website for $1. I don't have the contract in front of me, and in point of fact, it's in storage in another continent, literally. But the idea was that he had this website. Now, it was necessary for my company to have possession of the website in order to carry out all of the infrastructure developments that had to be put in place, specifically the issue of the credit card. You cannot have somebody else owning a website and you using that website that somebody else owns in order to set up a credit card facility, right? So, my company had to own that website, and yes, we had agreed that I would give it back to him for $1, but there were other conditions, and I was never anticipated that after just a few months he'd pull out. There was never that anticipation, and so because of it. It created a very difficult situation for me, a difficult situation whereby we wound up just flinging shit at one another. I mean, there were emails that he sent to me that were just full of expletives and just calling me all kinds of names, just to get back at me. And then he smeared me on his website, on his blogging site, which is where the information came from. Just maliciously, just to get back at me, okay? Now, I do have to point out, this individual later would do 2 Kickstarter campaigns. And I would suggest that people look into those 2 Kickstarter campaigns because in total, those 2 Kickstarter campaigns raised something like $110,000, $115,000, something like that. And really nothing came of it. His supporters put in a lot of money, and they were supposed to get like some economic modeling or some other nonsense from him, and none of that ever came to pass. And so, I mean, if we're going to start to look at people's private situation, you're going to start to realize that people are not so pristine and perfect as they claim to be. And this individual that I was associated with, he was fired from his previous job. He did some sketchy stuff on Kickstarter. He smeared me over things that were just, not true. I mean, he said that that at one point I was cheating him out of the credit card money, and it was right there. He just didn't look at the numbers correctly, which he himself admitted in some email that I think the Guardian or somebody exchanged with him. So
So at this point, there's lots of allegations that you're mentioning in the Kiwi Farms article that have been denied by Steve Kim himself. So here on this stream, we're not gonna go review allegations of a victimless crime, because if the person who's supposed to be the victim says no, I was wrong, and Steve Keen admitted that he misinterpreted the information that you were honestly sending to him, at this point, these allegations, I bar them as invalid. So we're not going to review them. Now, the last allegation in that segment is that Steve Keen, although he recognizes that he was wrongly interpreting the numbers that you were honestly sending him. So
just to correct you, it's not that I was sending him this information.
He had access to it.
He had access to a third-party credit card processing company. Okay, it wasn't me telling him these are the numbers. It was him going to that third-party company, a company called Authorize.net, which is the major credit card processing company for 90%, 80% of paid sites are processed by Authorize.net. And you can grant other people access to the credit card information, which he had. He had simply just looked at the numbers incorrectly. And it was numbers held by a third party, not information that I was giving him, information that he was accessing independently of me. Okay?
So even if Steve Keen was fooled by the format of the data that he was interpreting, even that act is not an act of Coach Red Pill. Coach Red Pill did not make up an Excel sheet showing the numbers in a sort of dishonest way. Steve Keen deceived himself about the numbers by looking at third-party information, which was accessible to both business partners. So at this point, what this looks like is you have we have what we call a broken contract. It's a contract where one of the parties decided to disengage from the contract. Now, in business, this happens a lot of times, and it's not dishonesty, it's just something that happens. And in these cases, the entire contract is invalidated because he did not follow his obligation according to the contract of producing the content, and on your side you could not continue the site, I presume, without him. And so what we have is not a case of someone frauding someone else. It's two people agreeing on something that they could not deliver, and that's very different. And for me to be judging any party in that instance as being the fault, I would have to have a legal case. It would have to be the case that Steve Keen sued you and that he would demonstrate in court that somehow you were the cause of the breach of contract, which, as far as I can see from all his own admission, it wasn't the case. He broke the contract by simply disengaging from it, which is not a dishonest act on his part. It's sometimes you commit to stuff that you cannot accomplish. And in these cases, people lose money on all sides, and that's how it happens. Now, the last, because although he recognizes making a lot of errors, and also he denies the allegations in the Kiwi Farm post, he also re-accuses you of something in his message. He accuses you that the fraud occurred in an email that you sent to him.
The fraud? No, there was no fraud.
No, I know, but that's Steve Keen's allegation at this point, which is the allegation that still remains on the... He claims that this email of yours to him was fraudulent. So...
where I wanted to recoup some of the costs that
exactly.
I had?
So let me read some of the details here so that people at home can understand what this email is about. So first, I will say personally, I reviewed the email in its entirety. This is certainly not fraud. In the best case, you could argue that Coach Red Pill is threatening to keep the website, but it's also his right to do so if the contract was breached. So in my view, there is no evidence in that email of any wrongdoing, neither fraud nor extortion or threat. But let's see what Coach Red Pill says in that email, which was sent in 2014 on February. So you say, no need for insults, Steve. I always liked you. I'd be happy to return the URL to you on 2 conditions. And then you say, please, your first condition is that he stops smearing you. And the second condition is that he refunds a part of the expenses that you've incurred, and you ask for $7,500. Now, when there is a conflict in a business situation, people are owners of what they are owner at the time. So if Coach Red Pill had access to the website, then the website is his. And if there was money in the bank account of Steve Keen, it's in the bank account of Steve Keen. And if Coach Red Pill has a house, Coach Red Pill has a house. When the business breaks for any reason, people keep their property, and then it's a legal question whether someone has stolen property. But in the absence of a legal case, you cannot conclude that Coach Red Pill is wrong in asking for $7,500 if it's his share of the expense. Coach Red Pill is essentially negotiating the breaking of the contract, which is a legitimate business function. Is that a correct understanding, Coach?
Yeah. Because the guy, he had been making money while I'd been just recouping my expenses. If you read a little bit further, I say in that email that I will eat the $18,000 that I spent on his site. That I just wanted a partial return of the money I invested, because it struck me as grossly unfair. Because the revenue generated, I honestly don't recall the specific numbers, but it was something like I don't know, 40 grand that he'd gotten, or 50 grand, somewhere in that neighborhood. Whereas I'd received, after my expenses, I'd received maybe 10, 15,000, okay? I honestly don't recall the exact figures, but I was upset because it had been all this time of dealing with it. It wasn't so much the money, to tell you the truth. What really pissed me off was the time I'd have to spend on this site, you know, like massaging his ego, and then having to, you know, it's just so much time spent on it. And now, after all that time spent and that effort expended, he was just dropping it. And so I was pissed. Of course I was. You know, who wouldn't be? But the thing is, it wasn't any kind of extortion. It was just simply a business deal that had gone south, and we're trying to negotiate the end of the process. That's basically it. Okay, and it's like any breakup. When you break up with a girlfriend, you know, it gets ugly. You know, you start fighting. Well, did you buy this book, or I bought this book, or did you buy this CD, or I bought this CD? No, I like it more, but you know, you paid for it, and you know, it's all kinds of crap like that. Okay, but I have to insist, there was never any kind of civil action on the part of either party. It was simply a business dispute, and it was sorted out, and that was that. And I wish I had been more adamant about wanting this the smearing shit that this individual put on his website, because now it came back to haunt me 4 years after the fact. You know, this was all dead and buried, and now it came back. But okay, let's continue with your account.
Yeah, I mean, so now we've debunked the scam artist claim, because we have Steve Keen, the supposed victim of a series of allegations, denying that these allegations are even true, and then him making a kind of last try at smearing you by saying this email was a form of fraud and extortion, but it's not. Because you can negotiate the end of a business deal. If my life goes wrong, and I don't know, my house, my car, everything goes wrong, I'll be stuck with the people who have lended me money, and my wife or my girlfriend, and I'll be stuck making deals, and I'll be saying, okay, well, you get the car, I get the TV, and that's essentially what this was. You get the website, I get the $7,500. So I think we've fully debunked the scam artist claim, and we'll go later back to how this is being reused now, and because this has been repeated by people like V and Sargon as being true. Now and there is evidence that it is false, and it didn't take me much research to find that it was false. Someone did a lot of the work on 4chan, so it's all there. Now let's move to the second allegation, that you are a male feminist pretending to be alt-right. Now, who doesn't love a good conspiracy theory?
That's a lie on both counts, because I'm not a male feminist and I'm not alt-right.
That's true. You know? Coach Redfield never said he was alt-right.
No, I mean, I respect a lot of the people on the alt-right, but I disagree with them fundamentally on a whole bunch of issues. And also, I don't like the fact that they have not thought through a lot of issues that I think that they ought to, specifically on issues of economics. and how our society is to move forward. So I do not consider myself an alt-right, and I'm certainly not a male feminist. And please tell your audience how this stupid allegation came to be.
Okay, so they found an old handle of Coach Red Pill on a forum of Rouge V, and he was labeled as male feminist. Now, the research indicates that everyone at some point on Rouge V forums is named male feminist because it's a category that is just jokingly given to some users after they make a certain number of posts. And in fact, I believe it's when you have 0 posts or a few posts, you are labeled as a male feminist. So
exactly.
This actually
also,
proves.
Go ahead. The second category is actually kind of funny. The second category, when you have, I have no idea, actually, 100 posts or 500 posts, they call you a chubby chaser, and it appears under your handle. That's funny. It's a joke.
So amazingly, this proves that first, you are not an avid Rouge V forum user because you only had one post.
One post.
You made one post.
They even used that one post to label me as a feminist. Okay. What I posted was that I have no idea what the conversation was, and I'd forgotten all about having written it. It was that I pointed out that Diane Keaton, the actress who had dated Woody Allen for several years, she said that Woody Allen had steel balls. She said that he was the toughest guy she'd ever met. And I pointed out that, Nebuchadnezzar and all that, he gets to write the scripts that he wants to write, and he makes films, and he doesn't have to show them to any studio executive or any actor, and he gets the financing and he gets the actors. And that's something to emulate, that kind of steeliness, that the balls of Woody Allen. Yeah, sure, he's nebbishy and all that, but you don't want to be like him in that regard. But in terms of, being a man in control of his own destiny and doing whatever the hell he wants, he's somebody to emulate, right? And that comment was taken to be indicative of the fact that I'm not actually that I'm actually like some sort of male feminist. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm reading the post right now. This is like Coach Red Pill 101. It's just Coach Red Pill talking about men needing balls and men having balls being models that you need to emulate. This is not at all a feminist post. And it shows that the person who made these allegations has serious issues understanding the information that they are reporting. It's very sad in our world that these people have such an audience, that Kiwi Farms can be that popular because these people don't know what they're doing. And if someone at Kiwi, I know that these people are watching my streams, because when I talk about them, they start harassing me on Discord, and they're like, I want to be on, JF, you're lying. First, I'm not bringing you on anymore because I've seen how you walk around the issues that I present. I see how you avoid my question. Secondly, you now have evidence in this video that your title and your content is false, and I invite you to correct this. It's ridiculous. You've claimed here on my stream, they came here and they claim that if there was any false information, they would correct it. Well, there you go. We are about to prove the entire content to be wrong. We've already debunked 2 of your claims. So the third claim is that you are a possible rapist, interrogation mark. Yep. So this seems to emerge from a case in a college, in some college. Yeah, you went to college. And the claim is that you would have forcibly kissed a woman and sent threatening email against her consent. Obscene emails. So the second claim, the obscene emails, has already been debunked. The emails were false. You've never sent emails of obscene content against women's consent.
Well, no, because first of all, this happened in 1991, this whole situation, and it affected my college experience catastrophically. And I made a video about it, a storytime video, and I explained how this can happen to anybody, and that a lot of times, no matter how many facts you have in your favor, you will be found guilty. And what happened was very simple. I dated some girl, and this was freshman fall, and she wanted to have a sexual relationship, and I didn't really want to, because I thought she was a little bit nuts on the one hand. And on the other hand, we just arrived and there were, hundreds of other girls. So, I'm not going to just hook up with the first one I happened to meet. I mean, hook up in the sense of like having a relationship with the first one I happened to meet. And she didn't like this. And so she leveled some very serious accusations against me. And those accusations were that I had forcibly kissed her, that I'd gone to her dorm room and tried to forcibly kiss her. And the second was that after that, she said that I had sent her obscene email messages. Now, both of these charges, I, of course, said that they were false, but the email charge, that was proven to be false because what happened, and that was the harassment charge, because what happened was that this was in 1991, okay, and my college had a system called Blitzmail, which is a really terrific email system, and we who were starting out, we didn't realize that the emails are forever. We thought that if we threw them away from our client, from our app on our computer, then they were gone forever. I certainly thought that. I didn't realize that the record of all emails was kept by the central computing department, right?
Yeah.
And so they just called up all the emails that had been passed between us. And in point of fact, there was only one email between us, and that was labeled test, because she had taught me how to use the email system, okay? And that was the only email that I had sent her. She had sent it to herself, and it said test, and there was nothing there in it. I never sent her any kind of obscene email messages, and this was proven. Now, insofar as the allegation of me assaulting her, which is a very serious allegation, you see, she said that it had happened around lunchtime on a specific day. And I was able to find people with whom I had been at that time during the whole lunchtime period and the afternoon period. And she kept changing her times. And I thought that by the mere fact of her changing her times, that the administration would just dismiss this whole thing and think it was laughable. But what happened was that in 1991, which is shortly after the whole Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas kerfuffle, there was a lot of political pressure being put on college administrators to find men guilty of sexual assault or sexual harassment, because it was the thing, okay? And what I pointed out in the video is that this thing of sexual harassment and assault in colleges, this isn't just now, it's been going on for more than 2 decades, okay? And it's going to continue to be going on because nobody's putting a stop to it. Nobody's just arguing from a point of view of common sense. That's why I did the video, okay? That's why I offered up this information to people. And of course, this group of individuals turned all this information around and tried to smear me as a rapist, which I anticipated. I anticipated that Crowd and T and his gang were going to try to smear me as a rapist. I said so in a video when I realized that Kraut was planning on doxing me. And I said this. Everybody thought that I was crazy, that I was just, paranoid and, just hearing voices practically. And lo and behold, here it's come out. And, this is the smear that they're using, that I'm some sort of rapist when I am not.
I have to say, I never formed a conclusion about you being paranoid, but it was certainly an hypothesis in my head. But you were right. And it's fun to look at this a month or even 2 months after and realize how much you were right. Now, on this case, so...
I'm always right.
So knowing that the email claim has been debunked, were you found guilty of a crime concerning the forcible kissing? The allegation.
Yes, they said that allegation was true, even though it was demonstrably false. But you're taking my word for it, okay? So it doesn't matter. The fact is that I was suspended for 3 terms, okay? And I was allowed to return to my university and complete my degree, which I did. And in point of fact, not only did I complete my degree, I graduated with honors and on time, even though I was suspended for a full academic year.
But
I doubled up on my courses.
I want to understand here, because you're talking about academic suspension. I'm asking about criminal court justice. Have you been found guilty of a crime in a criminal court? So
I've never been arrested.
So this is one of these examples of university college kangaroo courts where some administrator decides to believe an allegation, and that's all.
Yes.
All right. So as far as I'm concerned,
okay.
As far as I'm concerned, it is very dangerous for people on the public space to believe that kind of kangaroo court. This is worse than civil courts. And I would say civil courts, I wouldn't believe a judge finding a fact in a civil court because it's not subject to appeal. If a judge decides that an allegation is true, it's not even subject to appeal. Here we have a worse case where a bunch of administrators who have no legal training, who do not understand what false allegations are, have decided to make findings and punish Coach Red Pill at the college level. This is something that is not trustable. Simply.
Yeah, and the thing that drives me nuts is that I was the one who talked about this as an example of how dangerous this environment in the colleges are, and how young men have to, keep their eyes wide open and their mouth firmly shut and be very aggressive in dealing with any kind of allegation like this, because it's extremely dangerous. And that was the whole point of the post, and it was used against me with these smears that are absolutely not true. I have never been arrested except once when I was 16 years old. I was picked up by a military patrol in Chile during the Pinochet dictatorship. And it sounds cooler than it actually was. I was caught violating curfew, and it was no big deal. It was trivial. But I've never been arrested. I've never, as an adult, I've never been sued, either personally or any business that I owned. And so, none of this is accurate. But please continue.
All right. So we have debunked the three main claims. And then there are some loose claims which are titled under liar and failed economist.
I never claimed to be an economist.
Well, yeah, failed economist would be that somehow you are someone who failed at some of your business ventures and are now trying to remake yourself on YouTube. The first thing is failed economist. Even if you have failures in your history, I mean, no one that you see on YouTube didn't have failures in their lives. Yeah. Failures is a normal part of the process of creative people. If you succeed at more than 5% of what you do, you are a magician.
Yeah.
It's somehow people do that kind of accusation against me, and they're like, "You failed your science career." No. I pursued a science career, and then I pursued other stuff. And I find that the stuff I pursue now is more productive than what I pursued at the time. But what I pursued at the time also shaped me as a human being. And so the idea of past failure is absolutely ridiculous. There is not a successful businessman in this world who succeeded at all times. Take even Donald Trump. Donald Trump is at the top of America right now. He had business failures. He had casinos that didn't work. So what? So going back on the liar case, the claim is so loose that I actually have difficulties understanding it. There is a claim that you posed as a gamer consultant, that you posed as the author of a game book.
No, I wasn't. I never said I was. I was hired to consult on a video game. I don't even like video games. I didn't like them when I was hired to consult on them, and I don't like them now. I find them boring. But that's just me. I mean, what you might enjoy, somebody else might not enjoy, So anyway, I was hired because I was a successful author in New York, and I'd written and published several novels with major publishers. And because of that, my literary agent one day called me up and said that there was this game developer that wanted my input and assistance on some game that they were developing. It was Soldier of Fortune. And I was like, sure, why not? It paid good money. It was easy. They flew me out, to, I think it was Wisconsin or someplace. And I had a nice time, nice people, met some of the game developers. I didn't know anything about gaming, and talked about it. And then I went back to New York, wrote up some stuff and sent it to them. And they said, well, this isn't really what we were thinking about, but, thanks. And I'm like, fine, okay. I mean, what am I supposed to do, right? I never claimed that I wrote any video game. I wouldn't even know how to write a video game. I've never claimed to be an expert on video games. I don't really care about them, right? And it was a fun thing that I did, and I got paid well. And it turned out that a lot of the stuff that I wrote, the funny thing is that I had actually never paid attention to what I did. And then I looked up the character that I had worked on, and some of the elements that I put in there were, in the thing that I'd sent them appeared in the character, which is pretty cool, but trivial. I mean, I never claimed to be anything other than a consultant, and I don't quite understand this allegation, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, so the allegation relies on assumptions being made by the writer, but as pointed out by the guy who debunked all of this, your statements on the public space are consistent. You've always said exactly that you've been a consultant on some gaming
Sure.
stuff, that you don't necessarily, you're not a gamer, and they failed at finding any public statement that is in contradiction with this. So instead they make an interpretation of your statement which is false, which is that you
And
would
what's
claim to
interesting,
be the author of a book about it.
yeah, yeah, and what's interesting is that they don't even mention the fact that I published two mainstream thrillers with major publishers, St. Martin's and Penguin Putnam, but now it's Penguin Random House, I think, whatever, and also a experimental novel, formally experimental novel in Spanish, and my thrillers were translated into a dozen languages. That they don't mention because that
So
would make
you
me
are an
look,
author.
yeah,
Which is the claim that they were trying to debunk. Well, we solved it. You are an author.
Yeah,
it's just that you're not an
published,
author of gaming publications.
No, I don't care. And insofar as my Spanish language novel, which was this experimental fiction, it was well received, and the thrillers were well received. But I decided to move on and move into, frankly, film production and film directing, which I also did, and I was fairly successful at that. And so what's the problem? But they don't mention that. They don't mention the fact that, for instance, a few years ago, I found myself writing a blog about economics. And the reason I was writing this blog about economics was because of the 2008 global financial crisis. I was very confused as to what was going on and trying to make sense of it all. It was a lot of information, a lot of things happening. And I started writing this economics blog about it. Okay. And as I wrote this economics blog, on a Blogspot, a Google Blogspot blog, nobody would read it. And then one day, like something like 6,000 people showed up to read my post. It had been picked up by a bigger site. And my blog took off. And I wrote about economics for a while because it was fun. But then I dropped it because it got boring. It got tedious, and I wanted to reinvent myself and do something else. And a lot of people have said that I was off the social media for 3 years. Well, I was doing other stuff, okay? I was working on different businesses. I was involved in a solar energy business. I was also involved in building, parking structures. And I was involved in real estate. I was just doing other stuff, okay? And the fact that I didn't have the time to be online, and frankly didn't have the need to be online, that was held against me. It's just a smear, a constant smear, and it's got up to here. And what drives me up the wall is that the things that I actually did that are really cool. I mean, I don't mean to sound like an asshole that, like everything I do is cool, but, publishing a couple of novels and having them translated into a dozen languages, including Japanese, Russian, that's pretty cool, right? But these smears, they don't mention that. They mention stuff that is bullshit, okay, and that I never said. But they don't mention the things that I actually did because they don't want to put me in any kind of a positive light. It's only trying to pull me down, Yeah,
I've heard these allegations that you disappeared from social media for 3 years. It's ridiculous. You can do something else in your life. And there's no evidence that Coach Red Pill was hiding from his past, or that he was somehow being pursued and he had to leave the social media. He did other stuff in his life.
There's the internet police. The internet police goes out and they're out to get me. Is that what's going on? Ooh, what are they going to do? Are they send me a tweet saying you're under arrest? Is that what's going to happen? What the hell, man? I mean, come on.
All right.
It just drives me nuts. Like I said at the beginning, sometimes this stuff raises my blood pressure because it's just so ridiculous and absurd. But it leaves people with a sense that that I'm a bad person, and I don't want people to think that I'm a bad person. You can think I'm an asshole or a son of a bitch. That's fine, because I actually am an asshole. I am a son of a bitch. But to think that I'm a bad person, because of some skewed bullshit that some rando puts together and spreads on Kiwi Farm, that's just unfair. Now, that's